Now we hear Johannes Seidel from Jena University, the Fable of Jotham, a call for resistance.
Dear professors, friends, and colleagues, having spent the last year here in Israel, I have witnessed these challenging or interesting times that have brought us together today. So I'm very glad and grateful to the organizers to have the opportunity now to express my solidarity with this lecture. When it comes to politics in the Hebrew Bible, Jotham's fable is certainly a centerpiece of the Hebrew Bible's political thought. Some scholars consider the fable as contribution to a debate of the different political systems of democracy, oligarchy, and monarchy that also flourished in ancient Greek philosophy. In the story of Abimelech, the main character, Abimelech, leaves the Shechemites, who are portrayed like a democratic Greek polis, the choice between oligarchy or monarchy, between the rule of his brothers or himself. In this, the speech by his brother Jotham, delivered after Abimelech had slaughtered his other brothers, expresses a critical attitude against monarchy. This critical attitude has repeatedly been conceived as profound critique in scholarship, famously expressed by Martin Buber. Die Jotham-Fabel, die stärkste antimonarchische Dichtung der Weltliteratur, ist das Gegenstück zum Gideon-Spruch. Jotham's fable, the strongest anti-monarchical poetry in world literature, is the counterpart of Gideon's saying. In Frank Krüsemann's analysis of the fable, this criticism becomes a call to resistance against monarchic rule. The connection between resistance and the fable of Jotham has thus already been recognized before. However, I favor a different interpretation of the story that directs the criticism against those who choose a king for themselves. Thereby, the criticism is based on a cosmic order of nature. This does not mean that Jotham's fable is not a call to resistance. In the contrary, this interpretation leads to a justification of resistance not against a single political system, but against any unjust rule. To interpret the story of Jotham, the answer of the Thorn Bush in verse 15 is the crux interpretum. The understanding of this sentence determines on how the story is to be understood. In the fable, a group of trees embark on anointing a king for them. After olive, fig, and wine refuse their offer, they finally turn to a thorn bush that answers enigmatically, thus posing the riddle on which the interpretations are focused. Vayom ha'atad el ha'etzim, im be'emet atem moshchim oti lemelech alechem, bo'u chasu betzili, ve'im ein tetze'esh min ha'atad betochal et arse ha'lebanon. And the bramble said unto the trees, if in truth ye anoint me king over you, then come and put your trust in my shadow. And if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. Also in the following, I use the King James Version. It translates the Hebrew atad as bramble. However, I prefer the more general reading, thorn bush. According to a major commentary, the interpretation of the story either criticizes monarchy in general and turns the sentence into a mockery of the political system, or the criticism focuses on a character in the story, the trees, the fruit trees that reject the offer, or the thorn bush. In my reading of the story, the thorn bush's answer is a warning to the trees that endanger the cosmic order by their willingness to take an unsuitable candidate as monarch. My argument is based primarily on consideration of 6 aspects of the fable: the repetitive structure of the fable, the semantics of halach, the concept of a cosmic order of nature, the semantics of atad and eres, the identification of the atad, and literarcritic questions regarding verse 15b. The short time just allows a brief survey of these aspects, which should, however, enable to better understand the interpretation of the fable that I offer. In scholarship, the importance of structure in capturing the meaning of the fable was emphasized. In the story, the scheme of answer and negation is repeated 3 times, the phrases being the same with slight variations, giving the fable a repetitive structure. This repetition underscores not only the fruit trees' responses, but also the behavior of the trees. Considering the semantics of halach and understanding the responses of the fruit trees as references on a cosmic order of nature enables us to interpret the repetitive structure. First, the turn to the fruit trees is expressed by the Hebrew word halach, the significance of which is shown not only by the repetition of the word in several verses, but also by its primary position at the beginning of the narrative, where it is further emphasized by a figura etymologica. Halach displays a moral aspect because the movement is guided by norms. Thus, the use of halach raises the question of the legitimacy of the tree's conduct, especially since walking ridicules the stability associated with trees. Second, the responses of both the olive tree and the vine display a remarkable explanation. They justify their refusal with the function of their fruits for humans and gods alike. Moreover, they describe a somewhat reciprocal system in which their fruit makes gods and men happy, and in return, the trees themselves are honored. Consequently, their approval would harm this positive cosmic order. This aspect gives the trees a bad intention since they work against the described harmony with their request. Furthermore, the function of the fruit trees raises the question of the actual function of the other trees mentioned in the story, of the Atad or the Arse Halebarnon. The juxtaposition of the 2 trees in the image of the forest fire shows a complete reversal of the cosmic order, which seems to be the cause for the destruction described in this verse. Let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. As noted in anthropological research, the thorn bush has only one function for human society. The thorn bush is generally used as fuel. Moreover, thorn bushes often symbolize chaos in the Hebrew Bible and could be seen as frequent victim of wildfires. This already clarifies the meaning of the answer of the thorn bush because it makes the second option the natural result of the Atad's kingship. The mention of the shadow also recalls its symbolic meaning. The shadow symbolizes the protective trait of just kingship. Since the cedar tree is depicted as the royal tree par excellence and is often mentioned with its protective shade, the transfer of this characteristic to the thorn bush reverses the natural order of things, especially considering the tree's difference in height. These arguments on the function of the Atad and the role of the Arse HaLebanon rely on 2 assumptions that are controversial in scholarship and therefore must be briefly considered. First, the identification of the Atad is intensely discussed, and second, verse 15b has been perceived as secondary addition to the text. The latter would displace the cedar from the story and thus greatly affect the proposed interpretation. For the former, I would like to briefly give my arguments for a vague identification rather than discuss all the proposals presented on the slide. A precise identification does not seem possible because we have too little information about the plant. The Hebrew Bible mentions the Atad only elsewhere in Genesis 15:10, where it designates a place, and in the obscure verse Psalm 58:10. So any identification is tentative. However, 2 observations can be made in favor of taking the Atad for a thorny shrub. In both the fable of Jotham and in Psalm 58:10, the Atad is related with fire, indicating that it is one of the thorny shrubs often associated with fire in the Hebrew Bible. Furthermore, the juxtaposition with the cedar tree suggests that it is a bush and not a tree, for this type of juxtaposition of small and large is also found with the cedar tree in 1 Kings 5:13 and in 2 Kings 14:9. The major arguments for the secondary edition of the Seder lie in the connection to the story of Abimelech, established by the fire motive here and at the end of Abimelech's story, and the change from first to third person in verse 15. To the former, one could list other references to the Abimelech story, such as the choice of the trees, which recalls the decision the Shechemites have to make. In addition, Fokken determined terminological differences between this verse and the end of the Abimelech story. The change from first to third person in verse 15 is best understood as a poetic device. It emphasizes the contrast between the trees and thus represents the totality of the destruction. In conclusion, this interpretation understands Jotham's fable in contrast to Buber and Kruseman. The story is not a profound critique of monarchy. Instead, it posits the concept of a cosmological order in which each individual of the tree society occupies a particular place. The fruit trees have their function in their fruits, which bring about happiness in the human and divine realms. The cedar tree occupies the royal position, and the atat must be kept under control because of the possible harm it could cause. Reversing this order by transferring an individual to the wrong place leads to the destruction of the entire system. This is vividly expressed by the juxtaposition of Atat and the Arseha Lebanon and the image of the forest fire, which is used repeatedly in the Hebrew Bible to convey divine wrath. Thus, the story criticizes the trees which ignore this natural order by repeatedly asking an unsuitable candidate. What can trees tell us about resistance? This interpretation provides a justification of resistance that encompasses not only a single political system. By displaying the consequences of anointing the wrong tree as king, the fable illustrates the danger posed by any unsuitable ruler. By electing the Atat as monarch, the whole tree society is put in danger of complete destruction as the harmony of the universe is reversed. Consequently, non-resistance becomes a suicide because there is no escape from an unfit sovereign nor from a malfunctioning cosmos. There can hardly be a stronger call to resistance. By situating the fable in Abimelech's story, the call to resistance is developed as it illustrates the character of the unsuitable ruler. By murdering his brothers, Abimelech lacks moral sense that makes him the wrong candidate for kingship. Obtaining the position he seeks does not change his character. Thus, he is doomed to destruction. Consequently, Jotham's fable generally questions government by individuals who lack morality as evidenced by their actions. However, the story not only demands resistance, but also provides an example in the character of Jotham. After having received the bad tidings, he delivers his speech without hesitation, as the paratactic sentences in verse 7 poetically display. Thus, he demonstrates courage to a man who slaughtered his opponents, his closest relatives. Understanding Jotham's speech as a rhetorical device rather than a mere curse also reveals a form of non-violent resistance that uses poetical language to persuade those who took the wrong path, thus using creativity to combat injustice. Moreover, the fable of Jotham emphasizes an important premise for democracies. As Jotham details, government needs characters of moral sense who respect justice. If a mass oblivious of the cosmic order takes a decision on government into its hands, it causes destruction. This reminds us of the current situation of all democracies, which face the rise of populist parties who destroy the liberal mentality necessary for democracies. In this regard, Europe, the US, and Israel are in a similar desperate situation in which the current political situation in Israel is a general example. Having spent this last challenging year in Israel, I'm proud to have witnessed the strength and power of liberal mentality. I've seen many people like Jotham courageously and creatively resist a government that has forgotten what democracy is about. I think they give us in Europe and the US an example, and I think they give us more hope. Thank you.